DRAMM watering tools have been the professional's choice for quality and durability for 80 years. Use a DRAMM rain wand to create the softest shower of rain for your beds and containers, a 9-pattern revolver spray gun for a variety of uses, or a Colour Storm sprinkler for a lush green lawn and garden. DRAMM, the professional's choice for lawn and garden. Available at a fine garden centre near you. Visit us online at DRAMM.com.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
Just not always the same ones.
I'm Steve Aiken, and I'm from Fine Gardening Magazine.
Hi, and I'm Danielle Sherry. I'm from Fine Gardening Magazine, too. You guys already knew that, though. Well, maybe we have first-time listeners, so it's good that we remind everyone where we work and that we're very minimally qualified to be hosting a podcast about plants, right?
Hey, speak for yourself. Also, we need to plug the magazine. You know, like it's a great magazine. If you like this kind of stuff, get the magazine. You'll get way more of this kind of thing, and it will be even better information with pictures.
That's right. Oh, and just as another reminder to everyone that go to the show notes on finegardeningmagazine.com to see pictures of the plants we're about to talk about in this episode and to also get a full plant list of all the plants we talk about. We get a million emails and you guys are like, what plant was that? What does it look like? Go to the show notes, finegardening.com. You'll see everything. And it takes a while for us to do that. So please go and make it worth our while.
And that is finegardening.com, not finegardeningmagazine.com. It's finegardening.com.
You got it.
Yeah.
Wow. We started off with like infomercial land, didn't we, today?
Right. Everyone's hitting the 15-second forward. Yeah.
Skip. Well, so today's topic is plants to build a bed around. And we actually stole this topic off a fairly popular magazine article that we just ran not too long ago. Authored by Irvin Etienne. And it was an idea that we really liked at the time. And then we didn't talk about it when we chose it for a podcast topic. So I'm not really sure if we entered into this, Steve, you and I, thinking plants to build a bed around being the same thing. What did you think?
Well, when you say plants to build a bed around, to me, I think of something that is going to be sort of the inspiration piece for the design of an area, or something that's kind of, we build off of that. It's plants that are interesting, but not too showy. You can build off of their qualities, but they're not the star all the time. Although they're interesting enough on their own to carry some of the weight. I think if I mention meadowlark lemon, will you know who I'm talking about?
Like who? Or is it a type of lemon? Is the cultivar meadowlark?
If I say Harlem Globetrotters, will you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, I want to go back to this lemon lady. Is it a person?
The kind of the leader of the Harlem Globetrotters was Meadowlark Lemon, and he would kind of run the team and run the show, on the court, and be like the ball handler to distribute it. And he could do, he did his own thing in his own right, but occasionally he would hand it off to Curly Neal, who would do his thing. He was the bald guy. Would dribble on the floor, sliding on the floor and stuff like that. And sometimes you'd head it off to Goose, and sometimes he, take the ball back and do his own shtick with it. But Meadowlark kind of ran the show for the Harlem Globetrotters. Was
he officially the point guard? Because that's normally the point guards, that's his MO on normal basketball teams.
If I knew enough about basketball positions, I could confirm that. But yeah, I would say he probably is the point guard.
All right. So we're talking about point guard plants here.
I guess.
Well, you are talking about point guard plants.
and just for your own sake, Danielle, you should Google Meadowlark Lemon.
That's a great name. I honestly thought it was a cultivar of lemon plants. I was like, wow, is that a show? Is that a plant I should build a bed around? Meadowlark lemon. All right, I'm going to Google it after the episode, however. Hey, but before we launch into our plants to build a bed around, can we do a quick corrections corner or clarification corner?
There's how much time I've made so many misstatements on this. It's kind of sad.
I know.
Go ahead.
As have I. But usually we don't get such a nicely worded email. And this was from Carolyn, who is a listener from Virginia. And Carolyn wrote into us just a few days ago, and she just listened to the fragrant plants for fragrance episode. And she started off and she said, I love your podcast, but I'm frustrated that you maligned the wrong lily in your recent fragrant plant episode. Asiatic lilies have no fragrance. It's the oriental lilies like stargazer, which have such powerful fragrance that sometimes people exclude them from floral gifts. So I answered back and we went back and forth and had a lovely conversation, but Carolyn is right and Carolyn is wrong. Two things. Asiatic lilies, there are a bunch of fragrant Asiatic lilies, but in the context of that episode, I think we were both thinking more about oriental lilies and in particular stargazer being so fragrant. So we didn't mean to malign. We never mean to malign any plants, honestly, because to each.
Sometimes I do.
Well, I don't. But thanks to Carolyn for writing in, and then we exchanged.
You malign Carex and Coleus on a regular basis.
I do, but I've come around to both of those. If you'll notice, I mean, I've shown growth throughout our 3-year time period of doing this, but it was great because Carolyn and I got to go back and forth, and I got to talk about an Asiatic lily that I really dislike the fragrance of, which is longwood. No offense to Longwood Gardens. But I really don't like that fragrant Asiatic lily. So you can get a little bit of both. But yes, Oriental Stargazer is wow, it's a bit much. And but thanks for listening, Carolyn. And then Carolyn also wrote in with some topic ideas. So other listeners, if you've got some topic ideas after 3 years, we're running out.
Right. So it sounds like Carolyn is replacing me as co-host. So I'll just bow out gracefully and let Carolyn have all these microphones and cords and whatnot in front of her.
But all right, so let's launch into our topic. Skippers, you can stop skipping now from the top of the show. Launch into your favorite plant to build a bed around.
Was I accurate in when I described what I think of plants to build a bed around? Is that are we on the same page here? Are you going someplace different with this? Or
well, yes and no. I actually, I think there's a couple of things that qualify. I do think a showstopper, one brilliant focal point showstopper, is a plant that you can build a bed around. So I have a couple of those. I think I have 1 or 2 steady eddies, that are just hardworking plants that do a lot of different things seasonally wise, form wise, texture wise, that are more of, I think, what you were talking about. So yeah, we can get into it as we go along. Yeah.
I consider focal point plants better suited for an episode entitled "Focal Point Plants," which we've already done. So I didn't do those. So.
Well, I think it can be one and the same, and especially if you're dealing with a smaller bed, it can be the plant that you build a bed around can be your showstopper focal point plant.
Yeah, I just thought that was a kind of a different topic. So.
Go ahead.
I don't disagree with you. I was just taking a more narrow view to give these steady eddies a chance to shine on their own and not be overshadowed by the showy focal point plants that always get all the attention.
All right, give me your first steady eddy.
There's one plant that I every time I see it in a design, I notice it. Not at first, but it usually comes around to me saying, like, "Oh, what is that?" And it's bird's nest spruce, Picea abies nitiformis, zones 2 to 8. And this is a short, squat spruce. It's rounded and it would have a globe shape to it, but it has kind of a flat top. And eventually gets a little depression in there, so that's why they say bird's nest spruce. It kind of looks like Big Bird and Snuffleupagus sat on it, and squashed it out.
I missed that episode of Sesame Street.
So it has that vibe to it. And it's basically just, it's a needled conifer. So, it doesn't have a lot of color, but it does have a lot of texture and form that make up for it and give it a lot of qualities that, that it lacks in color. So it has a lot of opportunities for you to play off of, to match or to, or to contrast with. And because it has a basic green color, it's great for calming down, any sort of riotous colors. Like you can go crazy in front of that thing, and the green plant is just gonna be like, okay, everybody calm down. Everything's okay because we have this nice big green round plant here. It's going to get to be about 3 to 5 feet tall, 4 to 6 feet wide. I think after like 15, 20 years, I usually see them in the 2 to 3 feet tall and wide range. Yeah. And it's, what's interesting and what made me think of this plant right off is that we had a cover shot a while back from Stacy Crooks's garden. Her garden has been on the cover more than any other garden in the history of fine gardening. And we had a shot from there with all sorts of wonderful things going on, but everybody kept writing in and say, what is that conifer? And that's how I came to know bird's nest spruce. And now I just keep noticing it and how wonderful it can be in a design, not stealing the show, but kind of setting everybody else up for success, much like Meadowlark Lemon does for the rest of the Harlem Globetrotters.
And every point guard who's ever played basketball.
Every good point guard. But there are point guards who just kind of like hog the ball and just go to the basket on their own and kind of don't pass the ball around at all.
Do they make it long on the team?
I don't know. I can think of some guys, that do it now. So.
All right. Yeah. Bird's nest spruce. Do you have one?
I do.
Okay. Did you say that?
It's still getting up to size though to do its thing, because it's a dwarf conifer. I guess, the growth rate is like maybe 3 to 6 inches per year. I think I read.
Yeah. So it's a slow grower.
So mine's he's getting up there. He's doing his thing.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good choice. I do have one conifer on my list. I figured, conifers are, dwarf conifers in particular are really good plants to build beds around. And also, we didn't ever talk about this, but plants to build beds around are basically the first plants that you put into a new bed, obviously. And conifers are a good investment to make right up front because they do take a very long time to size up into something massive or, at least noticeable. All right, I went in the totally opposite direction. I'm going for a showstopper. And it's Sun King Aurelia cordata, Sun King, zones 4 to 8. This plant rocks. I know we've talked about it on this podcast before. I know that we are in disagreement about how easy and or hard it is to grow, but I mean, you guys know I'm not a great gardener. I'm not very attentive. I have really, really tough conditions, mostly hilly, lean soil, full sun. And this thing does great. I've had it for 6-7 years now, my original plant. And I've got another one on a partial sun area, which is on the other side of the house, is doing just as well. This guy gets 3 to 6 feet tall and wide. Mine is definitely maxed out at 6 by 6. It's massive. It's a big boy. It's got these beautiful palmy leaves that, depending on how much sun you put them in, are either bright yellow and or partial shade. They're more of a chartreusey color. It sizes up fast. I mean, I would say within 2 years, mine had reached 3 to 4 feet tall and wide. And it's just bulky. It's a presence. It's a glowing orb in the garden. And it plays so nicely off of blues and purples, and it just really, it provides a perfect focal point. It's a perfect backdrop plant too, which is weird for a plant to play both of those roles. I've planted it in friends' gardens. Actually, I think the photo I'm going to throw up online for the show notes is one that I planted in a friend's garden, where it's playing so nicely with catmint all around its base. Just a great, great plant. It dies completely back, which is pretty interesting because it looks like it's a woody shrub, when you see it all in its full glory in midsummer, but it dies completely to the ground. And this year, with my original plant, which is now its root mass that you can see is probably 2.5 feet wide or so, I'm going to attempt division. And I'm scared. I'm really, really scared because I've seen nothing online about dividing into an Aurelia. Nothing.
Just go for it, and then give the division to someone who doesn't live near you, but someone who you talk to on a regular basis, so you can check up on it to make sure it's doing okay. I don't think we disagree on how easy it is to take care of. I would agree that it's probably easy to take care of, but I've still killed it twice just because of my own negligence.
Yeah.
But that said, I have some on order for the spring. So I'm going back to it for a third time. I mean, I think that's just how cool of a plant it is. It's worth my actual attention to it. And I keep finding new spaces for like, ooh, that's where I'm going to put my Aurelia Sun King. And I just yesterday, while grilling up dinner, was thinking like, oh, that's where I can put Aurelia Sun King. It's going to get mostly shade though. So how are the leaves going to be green, or are they going to have some level of chartreuse? Because I want chartreuse.
They'll have some level of chartreuse. I mean,
okay.
When I say partial shade, I'm probably partial to mostly shady in the second area that I have it. And it definitely, you know what it does? It does that, hey, I'm green in the center, but I have a golden edge. That's kind of what it does. It doesn't really go all like to a solid chartreuse color, but it's still, next to, for instance, next to Amsonia, Hubrichtii on that side. What else do I have on that side? Next to a plain green, it obviously looks golden. So it's not going to be all green for you. I know I have Amsonia Hubrichtii in partial shade. It does great. I don't understand it. It's a freak of nature.
So just a procedural question here. How many times can we mention a plant on this podcast before we say like, okay, that's enough. Let's not mention that one again.
Well, I think you've set the threshold with Carex. So 153.
Okay. All right. Well, so you're pretty much done with Sun King Aurelia.
I probably am. I'm sorry. It is just, it was the first plant that popped into my head. And I thought, all right, I probably shouldn't mention it, but I have to. I absolutely have to.
I think you're in the pocket of Big Aurelia. I think you're just a shill for.
I am. That's it. You just gave up your rights to my division.
You're an influencer who gets paid in Aurelias,
which you will not be getting any of. Mm. Steve, do you have a steady Eddie for me?
Well, I have, yes, of course, but I think this one has more of a showy season than Bird's Nest Spruce, and I think. All oakleaf hydrangeas are great plants to build a bed around, but they can get real. They can get huge. So the one I'm going to recommend is Sikes Dwarf oakleaf hydrangea, hydrangea quercifolia Sikes Dwarf, zones 5 to 9. So being a dwarf, it's only going to get to be about 3 to 4 feet tall and wide, maybe a little bigger over like 15. But that's what to expect basically in your lifetime. So it's a manageable size shrub, but big enough to have a presence. And the foliage on it, if looks like an oak leaf, so it's a heavily lobed foliage on it, long foliage, maybe like 8-10 inches. So that has a lot of personality to it that you can work with. And then it has these 3 to 4 inch long flower cones. That start off white and then, age to tinges of red. And then they gradually fade to, that beige brown thing, but in a good way, not like an ugly brown. And so there's a lot going on that you can work with. And they do have a long season of interest that, again, you can play off of and use, as a basis to do cool things with your design, which is what I want from a backbone plant. I like things like Bird's Nest Spruce that have all season interest. They don't go dormant. I think that's great because then your design doesn't die at the end of the season. And oakleaf hydrangea tends to get like a flaky bark to it, so it has something going on in winter, and it has kind of a cool gnarly, twisted, stems to it. So that's something going on in winter. But in spring you get the foliage, and then early summer you get the flowers that last almost all the year, and then in fall you get that wonderful color to oakleaf hydrangea foliage, which is maroonish brown, like deep, Corinthian leather. Kind of vibe to it, and so it's an all season stunner without being a scene stealer, from everything else. But it's it sets up a scene and can hold the scene, but will not overpower your design. So that's Sikes Dwarf oakleaf hydrangea.
I've never heard of Sikes Dwarf. I actually thought you were going, because we had kind of spoken off the cuff a couple of days ago. I thought you were going with Little Honey, and I would have gone with that if I could find a picture of it, but I couldn't. So I had to go with Sikes Dwarf. Little Honey is another great dwarf oakleaf hydrangea with golden leaves to it. Yeah. Golden to chartreuse foliage to it, which isn't everybody's cup of tea. So I like that you recommended, a dwarf oakleaf hydrangea that's, kind of the standard hydrangea quercifolia, only shrunk down. That's pretty cool. I got to look for that. That's interesting. I've got a couple of different varieties of oakleaf hydrangeas, but they're all beasts. I mean, 7 to 8 feet tall and wide. They're big, very big.
Sikes Dwarf is like one of the first dwarf varieties out there. A whole bunch of new ones have come on the market since then. But I went with the classic because I know it.
I like it a lot. All right, I'm going to give you a steady Eddie, but it's kind of just like your last steady Eddie, that it's a steady Eddie, but it does have a show-stopping moment along the way that people would consider a show-stopping moment. Yeah. So I figured I wanted to get a perennial into the mix. I think it's easy for us to go to the woody plants, the trees and shrubs as being those plants to build a bed around. They just seem like natural fits. You start with the bones of the garden and then you build around it. But I felt like there are perennials that would fit the bill for plants to build a bed around. Now, I cheated a little because I picked a perennial that could be mistaken for a shrub, and that's baptisia.
Well, like Aurelia Sun King.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, you're right. I always think of Aurelia Sun King as being a shrub, but it actually is an herbaceous perennial. But this one is more commonly thought of, and that's baptisia. And, plant any and all baptisia, they're all going to do the same thing that I'm about to describe as far as being that plant that really gives you that, bulk to build the rest of your design around. But I chose the cultivar Lunar Eclipse because I feel like if there's one cultivar that I would choose, it would be this one called Lunar Eclipse. Now, baptisias are zone 4 to 8. Native plant, which is awesome. 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. So this is a bulky perennial. And for all intents and purposes, it looks like pea foliage. It's a glaucous blue, kind of shiny little teardrop shaped leaves that are up and down the stem. And it looks like pea, the peas that you grow in your vegetable garden. It looks like that foliage. Really nice texture, kind of an upright, mounded, strong stemmed plant that for, spring, early summer, back in fall, is nothing but a nice glaucous blue-green shrub, perennial shrub. But in late spring, early summer, depending on where you live, this thing throws up these candles of flowers that, again, look like panicles of pea flowers. And the reason that I chose Lunar Eclipse is because this one has an ombre effect to that long 8-inch candle of flowers. The flowers at the very tippity top start off as white, and then you transition down and they kind of get sky blue, and then it goes to a dusty purple, and then the flowers on the very, very bottom of the panicle of that flower are a dark purple. And It's one of those plants that you saw when it first came out in catalogs, and I said, no stinking way. They photoshopped the bejesus out of that photo. This thing, it's impossible. This is not going to look like this. But yeah, go ahead.
What's an ombre effect?
Wait, I think the ladies will know what ombre is, but ombre is when you go from like it's typically now it's hair. They describe hair, but you go from darker to lighter or lighter to darker. You kind of go in that range. That's what ombre effect means.
Kind of a chiaroscuro effect,
Yeah, okay, all right.
Okay, yeah. And just if we could leave the obscure references that nobody knows to me, I think that would be best. Leave it to me and Meadowlark Lemon.
I mean, I think a lot of people know ombre from hair color, but I think a lot of people know ombre just because it's like, it's kind of a tie-dyeing effect, but it's all within one hue.
All I could think of was like a Western cowboy saying, "Okay, ombre." That's all I could think of.
No.
Anyway, go back to baptisia.
All right, so back to baptisia. So this lunar eclipse, that's what it does. It's beautiful. The flowers last for, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks. They keep coming, and then the flowers give way to these really cool black seed pods that look like peas, sugar snap peas, which kind of gives it a little bit more interest. But then, you're just left with this kind of bulky, beautiful shrub. And it's not one of those perennials that it blooms and then it starts to really go downhill and, just kind of loses its vigor and poops out at the end of the season. This thing keeps going. I actually keep cutting the foliage for flower arrangements all the way through fall. It's really, really nice. It's a bulky star that does have its shining moment when it's in flower, late spring, early summer. But other than that, I think I would grow it even if it was just that glaucous blue foliage of 2 to 3 feet tall and wide all year long. This is going to need full sun. It's drought tolerant because it's got a crazy taproot. So once you get it established, it's awesome, and it thrives in lean soil.
Well, how do you feel about the seed heads?
I love them.
Oh, okay.
Do you not like them? I think
they're a hideous black,
I think it's really
thing.
I think they're really cool. They look like they look like sugar snap peas that are this, kind of dark purple color. I think they're neat. I like them.
They look like sugar snap peas that you forgot in the basement for 2 years. And you're like, oh, what's in it? Oh, it's because they're black. But I think a lot of people call them ornamental. I don't think the seed pods are ornamental, but the rest of the plant is great. Yeah, I think it's amazing. But I am sad because just the other day I was looking at this spot in my garden. I'm like, isn't there supposed to be a baptisia there?
Oh,
and
no.
it ain't coming back. So I don't. It doesn't have full sun. It has partial sun.
Okay.
And we had a drought last year, so I'm thinking that could be it. But I'm just
What about voles?
I was like, well, no, because they didn't get anything else. I mean, the entire bed looks fine. And I was poking around in the leaf mold that I've got there. I'm like, isn't there anything coming up here? And there's just nothing. And I'm like, there's a baptisia here somewhere.
Oh, weird.
So what usually happens, I'm like, oh no, it's gone. And then like I go out the next day and there's shoots all over the place. Like, oh, there it is. So I'm hoping that happens, but I think it should be up by now.
Yeah, and, mine is.
alas.
I'm starting to see signs of life on mine.
Okay.
So that would be a bummer.
That just gives me an opportunity. Maybe Aurelia Sun King.
There you go.
So I think you were right about perennials being plants that you can build a bed around. And I think what you can see that we're getting at here is plants that have a big enough substance that they have a presence, throughout the year, so that they kind of have a bulk to them. And of course, you could build your bed around some small perennial that you just loved, and then use that to build off of. But and then repeat it enough, maybe in masses or throughout can kind of form a sort of visual backbone to a bed. But again, I went with the bigger plants, and so for perennials, and especially one for the shade, because it's hard to get shrubs for the shade. I like Abiqua drinking Gourd'hosta for adding bulk and really forming the backbone of a shade bed. Hosta is zones 3 to 8. And what makes this one different is it has large, bluish, heavily corrugated foliage to it, but it's cupped upwards. So it looks sort of like a little gourd that you would dip in the water for drinking. Very unique looking, but not in sort of like a freakish way that's going to, distract people, but enough that it will attract their attention if you're looking at it. And the bluish foliage in the shade just always catches my eye. And it's big enough. It gets to be about 2 feet tall and 3 feet wide. So it has plenty of personality. But again, just like all the other plants, it's the personality isn't so strong that it's going to be distracting, So yeah, in a shade garden, if you're looking for something to repeat and to give your bed some oomph, I would go with a drinking Gourd'hosta, with the caveat that if you have deer, forget about it.
Yeah, you're going to have to block it somehow or, do some barrier plantings. But yeah, I would agree with that, those larger hostas. I know you also do Princess Wu, isn't it?
Oh, no, I have Wu La La. So Empress Wu is an extremely large hosta, but I find the leaves kind of boring. But they came out with a variegated version of it, and that's Wu La La.
Wu La La.
I also do Summon Substance, which I've talked about a lot on here. Francis Williams.
That's another good one. I love
another great one. Yeah.
Guacamole. That's a great one that I love as well. Yeah, that's a good one. And it's hard. Yeah, in the shade. I think I completely ignored the shade on my list. So, I don't have a ton of shade, but I'm glad you did that one. That's good. All right. So I'll hop off of that and do another standard green plant, but it's more in line with your bird's nest spruce. I picked Eastern white pine, and in particular, I just wanted to say the dwarf varieties or maybe the columnar varieties, but it's a northeastern native conifer. I would argue to say that it is one of the best textured conifers that is out there. The needles are soft and just supple. The candling, when it puts on new growth, is a brightish yellow color. It's really attractive. The bark of Eastern white pines are always silver with a little bit of stippling on them. It's just a really great all-around plant. And there is a bazillion different cultivars out there. If you're going to build a bed around it, I would say to stick to those dwarf varieties. Blue shag is a good one. That's, 3x3. I have one that I'm going to identify as Stowe Pillar, which is a columnar variety. However, I'm not entirely sure that that's actually what the cultivar name is. I got this, this white pine from Caddy's Falls Nursery it was a nursery that was in Vermont. I think they've since closed down, but they were, the nurseryman there was notorious for finding these witches' brooms. And I think it was labeled as Stowe Pillar, but mine is looking a little different than the ones that I found for a Google search. So I'll throw a photo up there and we'll say that's what it is. But it's very columnar. It's got these blue-green needles to it. Excellent texture. It's not a star, but it adds to the scene no matter what. I love building off of it with, in another area of the garden, I've got some other blue flowering plants, like that dragon's head, Nordic dragon head. There we go. That just looks really, really cool kind of around the base of it. And Eastern white pine, you can put in sun, you can put it in shade. Understand if you put it in shade, it tends to be a little bit looser habit to it. Deer will nibble on it, but it's not their exceptional favorite. They're not going to mow it down like they would an arborvitae. I think it's a really solid conifer to just, kind of infuse into your beds no matter what. Now, listen, if these big giant ones, getting up to 20, 30 feet tall are your cup of tea, you can also build a bed around that, because that is the perfect backdrop plant that you then build off of in front of. Say it's, a long border at the end of your property. That is still a really good plant to build a bed around, but it's not in the fashion of we're saying, hey, put this in the middle and then build around it, or put this off to this. It's a great backdrop plant. So comes in a myriad of different forms, and I would say Stowe Pillar I think, is one that I really dig in my garden, and I definitely built a bed around it.
You know, when you said that, I had a moment because as I walked by my dwarf eastern pine, Pinus strobus, I remember
you have
taking a
mini
picture.
twists, right?
Well, no, I have another one on the other side
okay.
of my steps on that I planted long ago. I actually planted two of them. One of them died, my fault. And then the one that's kind of in the worst spot has lived. But I said, like, oh, this is a plant I've got to talk about on the podcast. And it might have even been for plants to build a bed around, and I forgot. But I needed to take a picture of it. It's such a, you're exactly, I agree with everything you said about it. And the one I have, whose cultivar name has gotten lost to the mists of time. It's about 3 feet wide, maybe about 2.5 feet tall. And it's in partial shade. There's no way it's in full sun. It's really not the best place for it. But it has hung in there when its partner died. And they reach $80. I remember that. Like, this is what, we're going to talk in a future episode about memory plants. This is what I remember about this plant. They each cost $80 and I lost one of them, so be careful about rolling the dice. They got attacked with bagworms early on because they were under stress, because I was doing my normal thing of like not taking care of them. So they were under stress and the bagworms came in, and I did battle with them sort of. I would go out and squish most of them, but not all of them. And this is the one that survived. And it does exactly what you said. It's supposed to do in this bed. Like it's adding its texture. It's a backdrop. It has this bluish color to it. It's very cool. I'm not doing enough to work off of it. But it is a great plant. It's a wonderful native conifer. Just a great plant. And I'm mad that you mentioned it and I didn't.
So that was Eastern White Pine, Pinus strobus, zones 3 to 8, which I don't think I mentioned. So, hey, we agree on something.
Yeah. Another perennial that I think you can build a bed around is a plant that I've loved for a long time. And I had it when I first started gardening, and I had a bunch of different kinds of it. And it sort of faded out in my garden for some reason. And I've gotten away from them, and I need to get back to them. And what reminded me of this plant was a webinar that I did recently. I don't need to tell you all. You all attended and saw my webinar on creating a garden vignette. So obviously you
humble brag.
It's, you all know how many times I mentioned in that webinar Siberian iris, and just whenever I mentioned it, it was always the foliage of Siberian iris playing a role and doing a job. So Siberian iris is it's about 3 feet tall, 1.5 feet wide, zones 4 to 9, full sun to partial shade. And if you think of the traditional bearded iris, this one is much taller and the foliage is narrower, but it's still that sword-like foliage. And it has, I think it has many more blooms per plant to it, or at least it seems that way. So there's much more presence in the garden than just your regular bearded iris, if that's what you're thinking of. But you get the foliage is 2.5 feet tall. I don't think it reaches 3, but then above that come the flowers. So you get about 3 feet tall, and it has this wonderful spiky upright presence to it. Again, that you can play off of, and it's wonderful. My favorite cultivar is Caesar's Brother, which has these deep royal purple blooms to it with yellow and white on the falls, on the petals, whatever you want to call them. I would call them petals, but I think they're technically the falls. And it's just a wonderful coloration to it. It's very regal looking, and again the form can't be beat. Super tough plant. Prefer moist soil, but hey, no moist soil, no problem for these guys, because I ought to be ashamed at the way I treated these plants, because I have abused them, I've neglected them, I've chucked them into places where they shouldn't be and forgotten about them, and they keep growing and keep looking great. And my mom would be so disappointed in me if she knew what I was doing. How dare you treat these wonderful plants like that? They keep giving you wonderful blooms, and you do this to them. I'm like, well, they don't seem to mind. Just a great strong plant. The foliage stands all season long, so again, like it's not gonna peter out and leave your design with a hole in it. tons of flowers on them. I never bothered to count, but it's just always very floriferous. And then the only maintenance I would say is to cut it back in fall. I usually wait till spring, and the foliage gets kind of tough, so that my pruners can't cut it. It just it does that thing where like it folds in between the blades of the and you're like, what the heck, just cut. But if you cut it back in fall, it goes a little easier. I have had rodents eat the crown on one of them. Like that's my main plant that I kept dividing and spreading all over the place. That was kind of the one problem I had with that. But other than that, it's just a great plant. Just that pure green, spiky, lance-shaped foliage just is always making its presence known in a design without stealing the show.
I always felt like I completely agree with that. I love Siberian iris. I always thought that if you went into, say that you are a garden designer and you were talking to gardeners and you were like, hey, so I have this new ornamental grass that is 2 to 3 foot tall, has really thick blades, stands upright the entire season, 0 flopping, and get this, it actually blooms. People would go ballistic. What? I've got to have that ornamental grass. That's incredible. What? Well, that's what an iris is. Like, honestly, irises look like the best behaved ornamental grass you could possibly have ever wished for. It gives you that same color and texture, and it blooms, I always thought like that should be how they market Siberian irises.
Right. Well, if you're worried about iris borers, which I had for the past couple of years, they basically devastated my Gerald Darby iris. Siberian iris doesn't get iris borers.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. Even better, like disease free as well. I've always played off of. I've played off of iris as being just planting it for its foliage, basically, not for its flowers. And Siberian iris I like the Japanese iris as well, but I love that because it's that strappy foliage and it really plays that same textural role as, for me, what I would want in a moderately sized ornamental grass. And
that can take full sun or partial shade. Like it doesn't seem to blink too much at some shade. I have to run out and buy some of this right now. So can we be done with this?
No, we have to do my final plant and then we can run off. Oh, we might have to listen to what Peter says and listen to the expert too, but then we can run out. All right. So I picked a tree as my last plant because I feel like to go an episode about plants to build a bed around and not talk about a small tree would have been just devastating to me. So I picked Japanese stewartia. Feel like that's stewartia pseudocamellia, zones 5 to 8. Yes, I could have gone with a bazillion other different small trees that I love, but I would say Japanese stewartia is truly a 4-season tree. It is gorgeous in the spring right now. I'm watching it push its new growth, and the buds are a coppery color that are just, when the sun hits them, they're beautiful. It unfurls to these gorgeous, kind of almost sandpaper textured, bright green leaves. And then just when you're like, oh, it's a boring green tree, late spring into early summer, it has these gorgeous white camellia-like flowers with a gold center to them. They're all over the tree. It looks so stupendous. It's just, it's shocking. It's so beautiful. And then the flowers fall off, the temperatures cool down. I would dare say this is one of the best trees for fall foliage. It goes from a vibrant yellow to it looks like it's on fire orange to a dark, dark red. Beautiful. I have 2 in my garden. One is a specific cultivar. One is just the straight Stewartia pseudocamellia. And it is stunning, absolutely stunning. And I forgot to mention that your final season, which is winter, this thing gets incredible peeling bark. And not just, you read about, hey, it gets peeling bark and you notice like one strand of silver on it. This thing looks like it's camouflage. It's got silver, tan, red, gray, and it's all peeling off. And it does take maybe 3 to 4 years to really start getting that peeling bark. But in winter, it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning. It's considered small tree, 20 to 30 feet tall, about half as wide. That's still sizable, so it needs to be in a sizable bed, but it's spectacular. It is spectacular. Full sun to partial shade, and I've got it in lean, dry soil, but I made sure that I watered well when it was getting established.
Isn't there a dwarf version of that just came out?
There is, yes. There's dwarf versions now of Stewartia pseudocamellia. There's also very fastigiate, skinnier. If you can't give it that 10 to 15 feet breadth, there are columnar versions as well. All of these cultivar names are escaping me right now. The other one that I have, which actually has a slight yellowish blossom to it, is called Milk and Honey. It's so freaking beautiful.
The only thing wrong with that tree is that it is not anywhere on my property.
Oh, I tell you, you know what? I'm feeling generous this morning. I think I have 2 seedlings that have popped up over the years that I've kind of masked off. I might be willing to give you one of those.
I will trade you a Fatsia camouflage for one of those.
Deal.
And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter with his thoughts on plants to build a bed around.
If you're thinking about what to build your bed around, might I humbly suggest something that isn't a plant? If you're fortunate enough to have an interesting sculpture, for example, use the shape or colour of that piece to help you select the plants that will surround it. When you're designing around a patio, your furnishings, especially the cushions and umbrellas, are usually quite colourful. Work those colours into the surrounding landscape, and you will have a seating area that doesn't only look good when it is dark and you've had one too many margaritas. Also remember to integrate the colour of your house, if it will be seen, with a particular bed. Or, if you are a devoted gardener, match your house to the colours in your garden. After all, plants always come first, don't they?
Steve, I'm a little offended. Peter talked about building a bed around, pots and inanimate objects and garden art. He didn't once mention the garden gnome we got him. He could have built a bed around our garden gnome.
If there's one thing you don't want to do in the garden, it's offend your garden gnome.
Exactly. All right, let's see what the expert has to say about garden gnomes or offending people.
Hello, I'm Richie Steffen, Executive Director of the Elisabeth C. Miller Botanical Garden, and I'm here to talk about plants to build a bed around. When I think about plants to build a bed around, I immediately think about color, texture, and long seasonal interests. It certainly doesn't hurt to have bold foliage or flowers and great branch structure to make these plantings successful. Because these plants are the centerpiece of a bed, these focal points need to hold up to and complement the plantings around them. I think a great place to start is with color, and big, bold flowers are hard to beat, which is why I'll start with a great old-fashioned plant that's proved its worth in our garden for years, and that plant is hydrangea. Few shrubs are as showy as a hydrangea in bloom. There's a bewildering number of hydrangeas available today, but I find that I'm always drawn to the old standbys, and with a little research, you can find a great selection that has long-lasting flowers. Many selections have been around for years and will be around for years to come. Let's start by talking about Hydrangea macrophylla, the big leaf hydrangea. It's hardy to USDA zone 6 through 10, but I really think it's much better in zone 7 to 9. This classic can be blue to pink depending on your soil acidity. In acid soils, the flowers tend to lean toward blues and purples, and in limey sweet soils, the flowers lean towards pink and rose. 2 of my favorites are Glowing Embers and Merritt's Beauty. Both are mophead types. Glowing Embers is a compact cultivar that produces huge flowers to about 8 inches across, big rounded flower heads, and when they start to open in late spring to early summer, they're pale lime green, but then mature to these vibrant pink to rose red tones or rich bluish purple tones. Its mature height is about 3 to 5 feet tall and wide. Merit's Beauty is also a compact cultivar with large flowers, but it's mostly intense deep blues to deep pinks or saturated purples with wonderful dark green foliage to set those blooms off. Slightly larger at maturity, its height can reach 4 to 6 feet tall. One of the features I love about both of these selections is that the flowers fade gracefully. Long after their peak bloom, the faded blooms show smoky purple to plum tones that look really nice until late summer to early autumn. Big leaf hydrangeas best in open shade the morning sun. Avoid full sun or hot spots. The flowers can bleach out really quickly, and water them regularly during dry periods for the best blooms and flower color. If you have full sun or you need a hardier plant, try Hydrangea paniculata, the paniculate hydrangea. This is the old-fashioned PG hydrangeas that we see in old landscapes. It's very hardy, tolerating USDA zones 3 to 8, but maybe a bit safer bet in zones 4 to 8. The flower color is not affected by soil pH at all. The standard in the industry right now is a cultivar called Limelight. It puts on a phenomenal show with lime green buds that open up into these huge, brilliant white cones that finally fade to a kind of a blush pink. It's a big plant. It gets to 6 to 8 feet tall, but it blooms on new wood, so you can prune it hard in late winter without affecting the flowering for that summer. Pinky Winky is a nice take on it. Its flowers are a little bit more open and airy, and it blooms just a touch bit later, but it has equally large flowers like Limelight, but the blooms fade to pink slowly, and they start from the bottom up, giving this really unique two-tone white-pink combo. It's another large shrub that reaches about 6 to 8 feet tall. Give paniculate hydrangeas full sun, regular watering during dry weather for the best in flower. If you want something more elegant to build your bed around, look for some of the smaller, upright growing Japanese maples. These are stunning plants. Japanese maples are known for their graceful branching and beautiful fall color, but many have lovely color on their new spring growth as well. A favorite of mine is Acer palmatum Villa Taranto. This grows as an upright vase and will reach a height of about 8 to 10 feet tall and slightly less in width. The leaves are deeply cut, but not frilly like the lace leaf maples, but they're rather linear in shape. This gives a very nice clean look, and the new growth on it is brick red, and then it fades to a bright green. As the maple puts on additional growth through the summer, you get these bits of fresh, red blushed foliage contrasting with the older green leaves. In autumn, the leaves turn brilliant red with shades of apricot orange. It's hardy to USDA zone 5 through 8. A striking red leaf cultivar is Rhode Island Red. This is a dense, semi-dwarf Japanese maple and can reach a height of about 6 to 8 feet tall and is round in shape. The spring foliage is bright red, deepening to burgundy for the summer, and then with flaming fall color. It's also hardy to USDA zones 5 through 8. Japanese maples need well-drained soil. They will tolerate full sun, but will also do fine in light shade. The last group I think you should consider are dwarf and semi-dwarf conifers. There is a wealth of beauty and textures with conifers, and that is present all year long. I find Chamaecyparis obtusa, Hinoki cypress hard to beat. The slow-growing cultivar spiralis only improves with age. It's a relatively narrow, upright grower, but the side branches have this unique twist, giving a spiraling effect. If you only have a small space, you can try Costrai. It's a much more compact cultivar. A mature plant of that is only about maybe 4 to 5 feet tall, and it forms this wonderfully layered pyramidal shape. These two conifers do their best in full sun to open shade and require well-drained soils and are hardy to USDA zones 4 through 8. These are just a few great plants for you to think about, and remember, as you design your beds, keep in mind color, texture, and long seasonal interest. Thanks for listening.
Okay, Danielle, that gives us plenty of plants to build our bed around, but it's the actual building of the bed that's the hard part.
I know, right? We should do a next episode about how to get other people to build your beds for you.
I would love that.